I was cleaning out my late husband's home office when I found a photograph of children I had never seen before. His name was on the back, his handwriting, and a date, 14 years ago. I sat down on the floor right there, between his old filing cabinet and the box of Christmas ornaments I had been meaning to donate, and I did not move for a very long time. Let me back up. My husband passed 11 months ago. A heart attack, sudden, the kind that does not give you time to say goodbye. One morning, he was standing in our kitchen pouring coffee and complaining about the weather, and by noon he was gone. 38 years of marriage. 38 years of grocery lists and Sunday mornings and arguments about the thermostat, and one good life, I thought. One complete life, the two of us. His name was Raymond. I am 64 years old. I live in a suburb of Cincinnati, and until 11 months ago, I believed I knew every important thing there was to know about the man I married. I was wrong about that. After he died, I gave myself time. People tell you to wait a year before making any big decisions, and for once in my life I listened. I did not sell the house. I did not clean out his things. I let his reading glasses sit on the nightstand for 3 months because I could not bring myself to move them. I am not ashamed of that. Grief is not a schedule, but eventually the practical things could not wait. We had a daughter. She is 34, lives in Columbus with husband and my 2 grandchildren, and she had been gently, carefully asking me about the house. Not pushing, just asking. She knew how much space Raymond had taken up, how many years of accumulated living were stored in those rooms, and she was worried about me managing it alone. So last spring I decided to start with his office. It seemed like the right place. It was his room more than any other room in the house. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, an old mahogany desk he had gotten from his father, stacks of papers I had never touched because that was his space, and I had always respected that. Raymond was an accountant, 30 years at the same firm, organized to the point of obsession. I expected to find files, tax documents, old client folders he had never returned, the ordinary debris of a professional life. I found all of that, and I found the photograph. It was inside a manila envelope tucked into the back of the bottom drawer, underneath a folder labeled Miscellaneous 2009. I almost did not open it. I thought it was old paperwork, but the envelope was sealed and had no label, and something made me pull back the flap. There were 6 photographs inside. 6 photographs of a woman I did not recognize, and 2 children, a boy and a girl, young, maybe 5 and 7 years old in the first picture, in various places, a backyard birthday party, a school gymnasium, a park somewhere, autumn trees in the background. In several of the photos, Raymond was there too, standing beside the woman with his arm around her shoulders, smiling in the easy, comfortable way that people only smile when they are exactly where they want to be. My husband, smiling like that, with people I had never seen. On the back of one photograph, in his handwriting, Deb's birthday, October 14, no year. On the back of another, first day of school for both of them. And then 2 names. 2 names that were not names I had ever heard him say. I did not scream. I did not cry. I sat on that floor and I felt something very cold move through my body, starting in my chest and spreading outward. How long? That was my first thought. Not who is she, not why, just how long. I put the photographs back in the envelope. I set the envelope on the desk. I walked downstairs, made myself a cup of tea, and sat at the kitchen table for 2 hours. Then I picked up the phone and called my daughter. She came down from Columbus the next morning, and I showed her the photographs, and I watched her face go through every stage of something I did not have a name for. Shock first, then a very careful kind of stillness. "Mom," she said slowly, "how old do you think these kids are in these pictures?" "Young, 5, 6, 7 maybe." She turned one of the photographs over and read the back. She was quiet for a long time. "The names," she said. "You've never heard Dad mention either of those names? Not once?" "Never, not in 38 years. She stayed for the weekend and we went through his office together, everything methodically the way Raymond himself would have done it. What we found was not in one place. It was scattered across 11 years of careful hiding. A second cell phone, just the shell of it, the SIM card removed, in a shoebox in the closet. A savings account passbook from a bank we did not use, showing regular withdrawals of $800 a month going back to 2008. Birthday cards tucked inside the pages of books, written in a woman's handwriting, affectionate in a way that left no room for misinterpretation. A lease agreement, co-signed by Raymond, for an apartment in Dayton. An apartment he had paid for, an apartment 45 minutes from our house. $800 a month for 11 years. He had another family. 45 minutes away, for 11 years whilst I was here. I want to tell you what 11 years looks like from where I was standing. 11 years ago, my mother was still alive and we used to have Sunday dinners. 11 years ago, my daughter got married and Raymond walked her down the aisle and cried, actually cried when he gave her away. 11 years ago, we took a trip to Savannah for our anniversary, just the two of us, and he held my hand at dinner and said he was the luckiest man alive. He said that. He looked at me and said those words. I have been trying to hold both of those things at once for 11 months now, and I am going to be honest with you. I cannot. They do not fit in the same mind at the same time. My daughter was the one who found her. It did not take long. The name on the lease, a little searching online, and there she was. A woman named Deborah, 51 years old, a dental hygienist. She had a Facebook page that was mostly public, and on it were photographs of two teenagers, the same two children from Raymond's photographs, grown now, and in one of them she had tagged Raymond. His name, right there. A comment from 2 years ago on a photo of a boy in a baseball uniform. Raymond had written, "That's my boy, so proud, that's my boy. I have no words for what that felt like. I am not going to try." What I did next was the thing that probably surprised everyone who knows me, because I have always been the kind of woman who avoids confrontation. I have always been the one who goes quiet, who waits, who handles things privately. My daughter expected me to take some time. My sister, when I told her, said, "Now, don't do anything rash." Everyone assumed I would process this slowly and carefully and never actually do anything about it. I drove to Dayton. I did not call ahead. I did not plan a speech. I found the address. She still lived in the same apartment complex, just a different unit, and I drove there on a Tuesday morning and I knocked on the door. She opened it. She was a small woman, younger looking than her own age, dark hair going silver at the temples. She looked at me and I watched her face change. She knew who I was. I could see it happen in real time, the recognition, and then something underneath it. Not quite guilt, more like bracing. "I think you know who I am," I said. She did not deny it. She stepped back from the door and I walked in. We sat at her kitchen table for 2 hours. I will not tell you it was calm because it was not always calm, and I will not tell you she was a villain because the truth is more complicated than that. She had not known at first. He had told her he was divorced. By the time she found out the truth, she said she had 2 children and no income, and she was afraid. She had stayed because she was afraid of what leaving would mean for her kids. I believed her. I did not forgive her, not that day, but I believed her. What I could not get past, what I still cannot entirely get past, was Raymond, the deliberateness of it, the planning. Every month for 11 years he had moved money from our joint account into a separate one. He had managed 2 households. He had told her he was divorced and told me nothing, and he had maintained that for over a decade with enough competence that I never once suspected. I thought about all the evenings he had said he was working late, all the Saturday mornings he had driven to the office on weekends, all the work trips that I had never thought to question because Raymond was reliable, Raymond was steady, Raymond did not do things like this. Except he did, he had, for 11 years. After I left Deborah's apartment, I sat in my car in the parking lot for a while, not crying, past crying by then, just sitting with the size of it. Then I called my attorney. What followed was severance of legal work that I will not walk you through in detail because it was exhausting and painful, and there were days when I did not want to get out of bed. What I will tell you is this. The life insurance policy Raymond had through his firm, the one that had paid out after his death, Raymond had changed the beneficiary designation 9 years ago. He had allocated 30% of the policy to Deborah, not to our daughter, not to me, beyond my share. 30% to a woman he had told everyone was not in his life. The insurance company had paid her. She had already received it. My attorney told me that challenging a beneficiary designation is difficult, that Raymond had done it legally, that it was his policy and his right to designate whoever he chose. I understood that. Understanding it did not make it easier. What I could challenge, and what I did challenge, with documentation, with every bank record and lease agreement and photograph I had found in that office, was the pattern of financial fraud within our marriage. The money he had moved, the joint assets he had unilaterally diverted for 11 years without my knowledge or consent. In the state of Ohio, that matters. It took time and it cost money, and there were days my attorney called me with news that made me want to give up. But I did not give up. I want to be clear about why, not because I needed the money, though I will not pretend the money was nothing. I am 64 years old and I live on a fixed income and the money was not nothing. But more than the money, I needed something to be true. I needed it to be acknowledged, on paper in a legal document somewhere, that what Raymond had done was wrong, that I had not imagined a life and found out the life was real, that someone with authority over these things looked at the evidence and said, yes, this happened, this was not right. I got that. It took 7 months, and it was not everything I asked for, but it was something. What I did not expect was my son-in-law. My daughter's husband is a quiet man, steady, the kind of person you underestimate until you are in a crisis, and you realize that steady is exactly what you need. When everything started unraveling last spring, he drove down to Cincinnati every weekend for 2 months. He fixed things around the house. He sat with me in the evenings when my daughter had to put the grandchildren to bed. He did not say much, but he was there, and that turned out to matter more than I could have anticipated. One evening in June, we were sitting on the back porch and he said, I want to ask you something and you can tell me if it's none of my business. I told him to go ahead. Are you angry? He asked. Like really angry, not at yourself, at him. I thought about that for a long time. Yes, I said, I am. He nodded. Good, said he. I was worried you were going to let yourself off the hook for his choices. The angry version of you is the one who's going to be okay. I think about that often. Here is what I know about the woman I am now. 11 months after finding those photographs, 38 years after I married a man who was apparently capable of 2 completely separate lives, I know that grief and anger can exist in the same body at the same time. I was told that grief comes in stages. And maybe that is true for some people, but for me it came in layers. Underneath the grief for Raymond's death was another grief for the Raymond I thought I had known, and underneath that was something harder, something I am still working through, which is the grief of realizing that some of what I believed about my own life was not real. I know that I am not responsible for his choices. I have said that sentence to myself more times than I can count, and I believe it more on some days than others, but I keep saying it. I know that my daughter is a remarkable person. She should not have had to carry any of this, and she has carried so much of it with so much grace. There were nights last winter when she called me just to talk, not about Raymond or Deborah or any of it, just to talk about ordinary things. Her kids, a show she was watching, a recipe that had not turned out right, and I understood what she was doing and I was grateful for it every single time. I know that the grandchildren do not know any of this, and I intend to keep it that way for as long as possible. They are 9 and 12. They loved their grandfather. That is real, and I will not take it from them. I know that the house feels different now. Not emptier. Raymond's absence made it empty a long time ago. Different in some other way, like a room where the furniture has been rearranged, and you cannot quite get used to the new layout. I am getting used to it. Slowly. What I did not expect going through all of this was to find out that I was stronger than I thought. I have never considered myself a particularly strong woman. I married young, I built a life around someone else. I made myself small in ways I did not fully recognize until I had to stop. People tell you you're strong when you survive something hard, and mostly I have found that annoying, because surviving is not the same as strength. Surviving is just what happens when you have no other option. But there is something else. Something on the other side of all of this that I do not have a clean word for. A clarity, maybe. A knowledge of what I actually need, separate from what I was told I needed, separate from what 40 years of habit had convinced me was necessary. I sold the house in February. I moved into a smaller place, a condo closer to my sister, with a patio where I have started growing tomatoes. I go to a book club on Thursday evenings. I have started walking 4 miles every morning, which I had not done in years. And there is something about those early mornings, the quiet, the light, the fact that the hour belongs entirely to me, that I have come to love fiercely. Raymond is buried in a cemetery 20 minutes from where I used to live. I have not been back since the funeral. I am not sure I will go. There are people who will read this and think I should be more broken than I am. There are probably people who will think I should be angrier. What I have found is that the anger and the grief both have a weight, and I am 64 years old. I do not intend to carry more weight than I have to for whatever time I have left. What I carry instead is this, the truth of what happened, the legal record that says it was wrong, the knowledge that I looked it in the face and did not look away, and the absolute certainty, clear as anything I have ever known, that I am not finished. I told my daughter that last month, sitting on my new patio in the early evening with a glass of iced tea between us while her kids chased fireflies in the yard. She looked at me for a long moment, and then she smiled, and she said, "I know, Mom. I know." The fireflies were everywhere that night. The air smelled like summer. My grandchildren were laughing. I sat there and I let myself have it. That moment, that quiet, that particular kind of good. And I thought, this is mine. This is real. This one I am keeping.